This podcast summarizes how to import CSV or general Excel files into R. We remember that we should not start with an experiment and then put data into Excel and import them to R, but we should better do a pre-study with simulated data, then think about the design of experiment, then do the experiment, and then after that the data is in Excel and will be imported to R. So if you have an Excel spreadsheet, which you should have for your data, you should make sure that this thing is complete, so you have no missing values or no empty rows. If you have missing values, like here NA, make sure that they are labeled as NA. If they're not labeled as NA, R will not recognize them. NA is the standard for this. Make sure that you have your variable names as columns, so each column corresponds to a variable and each line corresponds to a sample. Then you have to save that file as .csv in Excel. That's very important. Depending on the language you're using, it has to be CSV Trennzeichen getrennt, or in French or in English, whatever is the corresponding name. Be aware here that German computers have different decimal characters than Swiss computers, so you need to make sure that all of that works. You will see a lot of warnings, and you have to confirm all them and then just continue. Now, the next thing that is very important, especially if you're using a German computer or generally a computer that is not Swiss, open the file in a text editor or notepad. There are different names for those things, not in Excel. That's very, very important. When you have that, then you see what kind of separators and what kind of decimal characters you have. So here you see that you have a separator, semicolon, here, 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 that you have actually a header because the first line is not variables but names of them. Then you also see here that you have row names. Row names meaning that each of the rows, each of the samples has a specific name. This thing is not absolutely necessary here. And then what is very important, I've already said, is the separator, the semicolon here, and then here the decimal character, which you need to really make sure that you have the correct one. So here it is a dot that we see here. In German computers, as I said, the standard is a comma. So make sure that you know what your separator and what your decimal characters are. Then when you have that, then you can import the data into R. For that, the first thing you need to do, very important, you have to change the directory to the directory of the data. Then you use the command, as we have seen in the lecture various times, read delim. You need to feed this one a name. You need to feed it a separator. The separator can be semicolon, comma, point, or whatever. That is the variable that separates the entries. Then you need to provide a decimal character, and this can be, as already mentioned, a dot, which is in Swiss computers. It can be a comma in German computers. It could theoretically be also other things, but I think point and comma will be the ones. Then you need to specify whether you have a header, and you need to specify whether you have row names in the first columns. So in our case, of the upper right corner there, we see actually the command down here. So we have the file name, we have the separator, we have the decimal character, we have a header, and we have row names in the first column. So that can be done now in R. And the first thing you should do when you have ready in data is you should either show all the data or just show the structure in order to check whether your data really is what you think it should be. You could also use the command head, which then just shows the first few entries of it. The format with which you will have after reading is a so-called data frame. That is just a data format in R. You can access the single variables in such a data frame with the dollar sign. So if you type here, for example, $gender, then you will get the genders in a vector. If you would like to put a new variable, for example, the variable with name shoe_n, then you can just add that again with the dollar sign. And you should just make sure that the variable that you add is actually the same in length as all the other variables in your data frame. If you would like to access elements in this data frame, you use the straight brackets. Here, for example, $shoe_n of 6 would yield here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 would yield the element 5. You can even change these elements when you access them. This same thing could be substituted by 100, so then you would have 100 there instead of 5. So now this was the exercise we have been doing in the lecture. I would like to redo the exercise with file_2.xls6 to just review that process. Ideally, you could now do that yourself and then check the solution. For that you can use the pause button of your video player. Good, now that you have done this exercise once more, I will show the solution, and this solution can be directly applied to the data set which you need for the final assessment work. Alright, so the first thing we do is we go to the directory where we have this file, and it's here. I open it here with Excel. So the first thing I need to do is I need to check whether there are some problems. So here you should put the 3, here you should put the 4, and then that's it. So then you save this thing, Datei speichern unter or File Save As, and then you choose CSV here, and you save it. Here you press OK all the time, it doesn't matter. Then you open R, and please observe here once more, you have a header, and each column corresponds to a variable, whereas the rows here are the samples. In R, the first thing you have to do is you change the directory to where you have your data. So in my case this is very well hidden. In CSV import. Press OK. Do not forget to change the directory. If you forget it, you will not be able to read in your data. Then I can type, for example, my data equal to read.delim. So now comes a file name. I have to see once more, what was it called? It was called file_2.csv. Then you need to provide a separator, which is in our case, how do we see that? By opening the file in a text editor. This is the file here. Yeah, so you can open that one with an editor or notepad, and then you see that you have here actually these separators. What you do also see is that you have one line too much. So let's close the thing in Excel. And then you see here this line of semicolons is completely unnecessary or even wrong. It would lead to just one additional line, so you just delete it and save the thing again. So with checking in a text editor, you also see whether you have some spare lines in the end of the file that you don't need. So that's it. So we see the separator was a semicolon. The decimal character in that case was not even present. We had a point since I'm working on a Swiss machine, and we have a header and we have no row names. That's why we do not even specify them. I press enter and I can have a look at this data with the command structure. I have 3 objects of 9 variables. That sounds reasonable. I can even have a look at it by just typing that thing. The command head in this case is giving the same, since it would give me, I think, the first 6 or 7 entries, so it gives here the same. So this is about data reading. Now please apply all this exactly in the same manner to the data you have created with your database query. You should have an Excel file, make a CSV file out of that and import it into R, making sure that you're using the correct separators and the correct decimal characters. Then nothing can go wrong. Good luck and have fun.